everyone, welcome to TERF Wars. Please let me know as soon as you can if you can hear me. We're going to have no technical difficulties this week, so that's the plan anyway. Happy Friday, everyone. So, welcome to TERF Wars. This is the show where I go through the last week's worth, so since last Friday and up until yesterday, of anti-trans nonsense. So I look at stuff from gender critical people, TERFs, and just general transphobes, and we just go through the nonsense they've said. Some of it's news, some of it's just general idiots, and we debunk it, we laugh at it, and sometimes we despair at it. So that's the focus of the show. So welcome to anyone this is your first time. It's exciting. Every episode from here is going to get better and better. So if you're in like 2024 watching through all the playlists from start to finish, don't worry, it's going to get even better. Yes, thank you for coming. So I've gone through and I found mainly things from Twitter, but from various sources. And in almost all cases, I've anonymized the people who we're talking about. And that's because in most cases, the whole idea is to combat the idea rather than the person. This isn't about piling on to someone. This isn't about like calling certain people out. Though saying that, I'm about to start with an example where I haven't censored anything. And there's a few in this episode where I haven't censored anything. And the reason for that is when it's like a major player, like if it's a major news organization or if it's a really famous person, then it makes sense not to anonymize them, because sometimes it is important who it's coming from. For example, when J.K. Rowling says something, it wouldn't make any sense for me to anonymize her and then say, oh, a famous author, because you'd all know who it is anyway. And sometimes the source is important. It's not when it's small accounts. And there's always this like grey area in the middle where like our accounts are big enough to talk about. Like I don't want to, when they're about the same size as me, like, you know, I don't want to become a target and all this kind of stuff. However, we're about to move on to some which are about that size, and I'm going to mention for reasons which I'll say in a second. So let's go and move on to our first. We have a good show this week, actually. That it's going to get very stupid and very extreme to a horrifying degree. So if you're someone who's watching this who isn't quite aware of how like ridiculous the transphobia in the UK is, like, this is going to show you how horrible, and it's not just like horrible, it's beyond horrible, it's like horrific. And we're about to see that. So anyway, let's move on to some examples of what's going on. Ta-da! Oh, great. 1 second. That's better. Right, so one of the exciting things that happened this week, crabs in the chat, everyone. Loads of gender critical accounts, like the medium-sized ones, got banned this week in a chain. Like, and I mean, talking to people, we can only guess, but like this is kind of coming off the back of them banning Trump and then banning all the QAnon people, and it just feels like their Twitter still doesn't apply its its own regulations evenly at all. But it's starting to apply them maybe slightly better, I don't know, or maybe actually looking at accounts that have had like millions of reports over their lifetime. So here's 3 gender critical accounts. There was like 5 or 6 of them this week that all went. So just briefly, this lady was part of a group which did the Say Yes to Hate campaign on Trans Day of Remembrance, which specifically was about Trans Day of Remembrance, which is the day where we remember all of the trans people who have died since the last year from transphobic violence and hatred, and from suicide, which is often caused by hatred too. And she literally did this campaign called Say Yes to Hate, which is disgusting. At the top on the other side is everyone's favourite, likes to talk about penises lady. And then here is like a classic example of an anti-gay person who likes to, you know, fight against. It's very, very pro-LGBT alliance anyway. That'd be a good explanation for those. So that was an event. That's and good to see all the crabs in the chat. Thank you very much, everyone. I'm enjoying the crabs. I'm not quite sure where crabs has come from. That's what she said. But it's a good little meme, so I'm on board with that. So the first few are gender critical people reacting to this, and this first one I thought was such a good example. So that actually the last guy who we were just talking about wasn't reported by trans people. He was mass reported. So that's where loads of people all report at the same time in order to like trigger the algorithm or whatever, like usually strategically. And it's something that gender critical people seem to do a lot. This guy was mass reported by gender critical people, despite being gender critical himself. They got in some fight because I think he said Trump's military ban was bad. For trans people, and it is bad, and that wasn't transphobic enough, so that's what the argument was about. But anyway, this person says he might be letting off steam because he feels betrayed by GCs, gender criticals, going to the right for help because we're not getting any from the left. It's deeply personal for him because right-wingers have actively harmed gay people, so I get it. Unfortunately, we don't have the luxury to be choosy about whom we associate with to get things done. We can only be pragmatic to get the job done and worry about our allies later. This sums up the gender critical movement, like, in its entirety. I just feel like this is what I should show to someone. Like, if I met an LGBT person particularly and they said, what's gender critical? I'd just be like, this is someone who's saying, I know that one of our allies who is a gay man doesn't want us to ally with these hate groups because they hate gay people, but I don't care. And I actually don't have the luxury of siding up with any people who don't hate gay people because they're the only people who agree with me. Like, maybe it's time to look at your viewpoint if the only people you can find who will back you up are homophobes. Like, I don't have to ally with any homophobes. If any of my allies came out as homophobic, I could drop them in an instant because I can't stand for that. It's disgusting. And then this kind of line at the end, we have to be pragmatic now and then worry about allies later. Like, that's such a naive way of looking at the world. Just thinking, oh, well, we can just, we'll just vote this fascist into power now and he'll deal with the trans people. And then we'll sort it out afterwards. We'll just deal with the fallout. Well, like, that's what they just did in Poland and Hungary and nearly just did in America. If you vote in the, like, anti-LGBT, anti-women people because you don't like trans people, then you're going to get screwed over too if you're gay or you're a woman. And like this is what I mean when I say gender critical is part of the patriarchy. It's that, you know, they're supporting these hate groups and they know it and we know it and they have to pretend they don't. But they always talk about it and we all know it. Like, we know who their allies are. They know who their allies are. It's just ridiculous. This one made me laugh quite a lot. So this person's quite angry and they're like, well, whoever reported our friend talks about penis lady, I hope their dick drops off. Firstly, it's a bit of a childish insult, but that's an extra good fail of an insult when you're talking, like, probably about trans women. Like, I hope it does too. Like, to whichever lady out there who was responsible for this, we know one in particular, shout out to Joss, who may well have been involved in this. But like, yeah, I hope so too. Good luck to you, mate. I was saying that I think this should be like our, like, to trans women between each other, it should be our, like, may the force be with you, like, may your dick drop off. May your dick drop off. Yeah. So one of the big events going on at the moment in the UK, or in Scotland anyway, is the Scottish National Party they get all the votes in Scotland. Every single constituency in Scotland has voted for SNP, I think, in the last election. And they are pushing for an independent Scotland, and it's quite a big deal because the UK will break apart, blah, blah, blah. You can Google that. But they originally started out quite good, I think, for trans people, or at least neutral. And over the last 2 years, people in England used to joke that England is so bad for transphobia, we're all going to move to Scotland. And now it's like the other way around. Like, England's just as bad, but Scotland's got even worse. And it's particularly because the SNP has just been letting transphobia run like rampant in the party. And they've got like real senior politicians who are like part of the gender critical movement and who are in all these like conspiracy theories about, you know, where trans people come from and stuff, which we're going to cover some later. And anyway, finally, about 3 years too late, the leader of SNP, Nicola Sturgeon, who is, at least in my opinion, quite good as far as politicians go, she did this like raw video where she hadn't planned it, didn't script it, and she was just basically saying transphobia is bad. It wasn't quite as good as if she had just said transphobia is bad, because she did say, I know some people have some valid concerns, which can be a bit of a dog whistle, but overall, as far as politicians go, it was quite good because she finally did something about it. So, of course, all the gender critical people absolutely hated that. And we've got a few replies. I mean, there was hundreds of ridiculous replies and I just couldn't be bothered to edit them all. But, like, I just think this is a classic gender critical one. You're like, I think irrational prejudice against trans people is bad. And then someone's like, so what do you want to do? Share a shower with a murderer? Like, what? Like, this is such a classic, I judge an entire minority by their worst members. Like, this person, Barbie Kardashian, is, I don't know if they're murderers. They had some bullshit, but they are a trans person who is bad. And, like, that's just the first thing you bring up. This is like saying, oh, we should let women have the vote. And then they're like, oh, well, what, you just want Myra Hindley choosing who the next leader will be? Like, no, we're talking about the irrational prejudice. Like, you're doing an example of irrational prejudice right here. It's just so self-fulfilling and circular. It's just so bullshit. They'll say transphobia doesn't exist, and then you say transphobia is bad, and then they do a transphobia. Like, fuck off. Pathetic. So, and then this is like an absolute classic. This little 1-2 punch here is just completely ridiculous. So someone's like, transphobia isn't even a thing. None of us are scared or fearful of them. Truly, we're not. We're just concerned for their emotional well-being. My God, like, this is pathetic. So I'm going to, every time I say pathetic, everyone has to do a drink, even if you're just drinking water. We're just concerned for their emotional well-being, they say, as they campaign to ban us from the toilets. You're not concerned for emotional well-being in the slightest, or you wouldn't be campaigning against our rights, would you? It's just such a weak attempt at a euphemism for, like, I'm not transphobic, I just care for their emotional well-being. Like, utterly ridiculous. But then to make things even more hilarious, the stupid reply, someone... Oh dear, I might have cut one in the wrong order. Someone pointed out, which we'll probably find in a second, that this person, just like half an hour before writing this, had retweeted this horrific transphobic bile. It was like their top tweet. It's like, who are you trying to convince? This person is trying to convince themselves that transphobia doesn't exist because they know that if it exists, that they're it. Ridiculous. This might be in the wrong order. Oh yeah, so this is the one. Like, they just posted this, just because you lop off your penis and wear a dress, that doesn't make you a woman. Like, posted without comment. Like, it's just generic, disgusted at the concept of trans people, can't be bothered to learn what they are. Transphobia, I mean, it's just openly transphobic. And then to just say, I'm just concerned for their emotional well-being. Like, yeah, you're so concerned for their emotional well-being that you're just retweeting aggressively disgusting memes about them. Ridiculous. Anyway, this is like, I don't know, this I think is a good example of like transphobia brain rot. It's where they think about it for 5 seconds, they don't listen to anyone, they're like, haha, I'm a cis person, I'm a cis man, and this doesn't affect me, and so I'm just going to think about it for 5 seconds. I'm going to use my logical brain to destroy your stupid argument. And then he says, It's not possible to provide protections for women if a man can declare himself a woman and access the same protections. That's not an opinion, that's a logical fact. So what he's saying here is, I've done a logic. I haven't actually looked at the evidence, but before I've even got to the evidence stage, I'm dismissing your argument using just logic. So, I mean, obviously, if we have two groups and you can just pick which group you're in, then we can't protect one of them, can we? Apart from that model of how reality works doesn't match reality at all, because, and this is very trivial to demonstrate how this model is nonsense, because in the UK and in like tens of countries, we've had protections for women in which trans people can go from being in that group away from it or from out of that group into it, and those protections still work. So obviously your model is too simple to the point where it's just doesn't make any sense. I mean, obvious, it's just so stupid. Like, do you just how can you be in a situation where you think that trans women who have existed, forever, but in the form that we're aware of them today, 100 years, what do you think they've been doing all this time? Are you really so unaware of I mean, obviously he is so unaware of trans rights and what trans people do that he just thinks that there are all these trans people. All of these people know about these memes about the trans women who, you kiss and then it turns out she's a man. They're aware of trans women who completely pass. So what do you think they've been doing all this time? Having no legal protections at all and using men's facilities, and it's just so dumb. And the worst thing is he'd smugly post this and get 21,000 likes. Absolutely no one could look at the situation we've had in the UK as it actually stands and come to the conclusion that women don't have protections for being women. Because just look at real life, mate. Ridiculous. Right, so now we're on to a series. I've done these little groups of the different things. We're on to the British media is utterly ridiculous. And this is kind of what I want to hammer home to anyone who's just learning about the state of trans rights in the UK and thinks maybe some of it's a bit exaggerated, or maybe, you just don't know. And this is the start of a ramp up in this episode where it's just going to show how, I'm not even sure it'd be possible to exaggerate how bad it is. So here we have an article written by two gender critical people where the headline is "Trans activists are hounding women out of public life." Just bearing in mind that the trans rights position is for public life, we want to carry on doing what we've been doing for the last few decades. I, a trans woman, want to carry on being able to use the women's toilets at work because I've used them for the last 5+ years. I want to carry on having protections for sexism if I was to be assaulted in public or something. That's my position. So there's no hounding out of public life. I mean, obviously they're doing their best to spin something out of that, but it's just trivially crap. On the other hand, they literally want to ban me from the toilets and from the changing rooms and from women's spaces and having women's protections. I mean, quite literally, in a non-exaggerating way, they want to hound me out of public life with legal changes. I just feel like this is DALVO, deny the victim. I should have looked up what this acronym stands for. Someone wrote down exactly what DALVO is in the chat. It's where you deny that you're the perpetrator of something and then you just accuse everyone else of what you're doing. And I'm campaigning to take away your rights. And also, you're hounding me out of public spaces. Completely ridiculous. And I also feel a little bit personally betrayed, though stupidly, by this one, because me and Professor Rosa Friedman used to be strategic friends like DM a bit, and I mean, that was obviously dumb of me because she's writing things like this and contributing to the transphobic hatred that I face every single day. So if you're watching Rosa, I am very disappointed. I'm an idiot. I'm sure you've seen the comments. But that's just the start of it. Here's an article from the Daily Mail from 2021. Just bear that in mind. BBC lockdown homeschooling programme tells 9-year-olds there are over 100 genders and shows kids talking to adults about bigender, genderqueer and pansexual identities. Like, trying to spin this as if it's like, oh, do you know what they're teaching your kids? 2021. Here's a headline from 2019 from the Daily Mail. BBC education film that claims there are more than 100 gender identities is blasted as nonsense and accused of confusing primary school. It's the same headline. It's the same article. It's the same bullshit. And it's just because they have some quota they have to meet or something. All of the UK newspapers have to do X transphobic articles a week. And in this case, they didn't have one. So they just recycled one from 2 years ago and made it more relevant by talking about lockdown. It's just such nonsense. The media is just like this in the UK, like standard. None of the newspapers are pro-trans. Like, you know, there are some like news outlets in most countries which are a bit in the middle, and then there are some a bit on this side and some bit on this side, and then there are some that are just like clearly extreme. We have the clearly extreme anti-trans ones, like we have several of them. And the Daily Mail, the newspaper which supported the Nazis in the 30s, isn't even the worst one. And then it goes all the way to nearly to the middle. Like, just like, I mean, the BBC and the Guardian are just on the other side of the middle. Like, most of the 60% of the stuff they do is bad. 60% of every article is crap, but sometimes they mention a few good things. It's just ridiculous. And then when you read an American news source, they'll just be like, here's a trans person. Like, they deserve rights. And it's surreal reading it. It was weird. Like, you can check on my channel. A while ago, I went on NBC and discussed gender critical people, and like, I was kind of nervous because if I'd done that article for like the UK, it would have been a both sides thing, like, oh sure, trans people think that they deserve rights, but have we considered that maybe they shouldn't? And this NBC whole piece was just trans people talking. Like, they interviewed 4 different trans people and that was it. And it was so weird watching it because there was no, and people have valid, grave concerns about the state of trans people. Like, there was none of that. Anyway, let's ramp it up to something even more ridiculous. So I'm going to read out this whole thing because it's so good. You are not going to see the twist. I think even knowing what this program is, you're not going to see the twist from this. So clear your minds. Please don't read ahead because you need to hear this for the twist. In Dennis Nilsson's forthcoming autobiography, the late serial killer admits that he toyed with the idea of feeding his dog, Bleep, a small chunk of human flesh. Elsewhere in the 6,000 pages of typewritten notes, which have been edited by a friend, Mark Austin, since Nilsson's death 2 years ago, the mass murderer reflects on the culinary possibilities of those he killed, likening one part of the anatomy to beef rump steaks. How do the relatives of his victims, the 12 boys and young men strangled and drowned between 1978 and 1983, feel about the publication of History, a Drowning Boy this week? Horrified, disgusted, as if he's still laughing at us from beyond the grave. Julie Bentley, whose brother, Carl, survived a murder attempt by Nilsson and fought all his life to stop the memoir's publication, went so far as to call the book morally wrong. Yet even that is an understatement. But their feelings matter only so much in that they can be used to ramp up excitement around History of a Drowning Boy. Any talk of morals is laughable in a world where serial killers have given free rein to publish murderous pornography. Are you ready? But Kathleen Stock, a professor of philosophy at Sussex University who dared to question the safety of gender-neutral toilets and male sex offenders being placed in women's prisons, must be silenced and ostracised. Absolutely insane. Like, here is just some 2.5 paragraph rant about someone who ate children. And we're just going to compare it to someone who had people write a letter and say she's transphobic, we don't like it. Like, she still works for a university, she still has a job, fine. She's routinely transphobic, promotes all kind of transphobic bullshit all the time, is quite a strong player in the gender critical movement. And as soon as all of her colleagues, like 600 philosophy professors across the world, signed a letter saying we don't agree with her transphobia, she then got interviews, in the Times and like across the shop, and of course has never been less silenced in her life. And of course, none of her critics got any time in the news at all to put their position forwards. Most of the articles didn't even cover what the criticism for her position was. And here we are comparing it to cannibalism and being like, what is going on? This is the British media. But the American media is still kind of wacky. But even then, like American media can go a lot more crazy than the British one. But the British one is just cruel, in a way that the American one just never seems to be. Like, his Breitbart News is like a white supremacist newspaper that's just like as close to acceptable to the mainstream as you can be and still being Nazis. They're talking about Joe Biden's giving trans people rights, including letting school kids play sport. It didn't actually cover kids of like college age and above. There's different regulations for that. But anyway, this is just such a classic, and it's more embarrassing every time it happens. So they're saying Biden signed an executive order on Wednesday giving sweeping rights to men and women who want to live as the opposite biological sex. Trans people, guys, come on. Pathetic. Anyway, of course the neo-Nazis hate trans people, by the way. Worth remembering from our friend earlier who was lamenting that their only allies were Nazis. Well, they've used a picture to scare people about sports. Talking about women's sports here. This picture of a man, like destroying a woman in a wrestling match. That's unfair. Like, that is bullshit. Why the hell is a man... This man went on to win this wrestling championships. Do you know why I'm calling him a man? It's because he's a trans man. And this picture is like 3 years old or something. I don't know. This guy has had to do several wrestling championships. Well, he hasn't had to do them, but he's participated in several years' worth of wrestling championships against women because in Texas, where he lives, the law is that you have to compete with your birth sex. So he, a man who was born a girl, has to compete with the women. So Biden's new thing that says he should be allowed to compete with the men actually undoes this problem that they are complaining about right here. It's just so ridiculous that this photo gets you, like, this isn't like, I mean, when I saw this, I wasn't even surprised. I was just like, again, this photo again. Like, this was ridiculous 2 years ago because this came out like 3 years ago, whenever it was. How can you be so bad at journalism? I just don't think they care. Like, they know so little about trans people. Like, here's a scary picture of man fighting a woman. Let's just do that. Run it. Trans people are bad. Scary trans women. And they just have absolutely no idea what they're talking about at all. Like some of the anti-transgender critical people who have been in this fight for like years still post this. Like, I remember Graham Linehan posted this exact picture like a month or so before he got banned from Twitter, like last year. And I've seen this picture thousands of times. And the first time I saw it, I was like, oh, what's this? Oh, it's a man who's being forced to wrestle against women because of stupid anti-trans laws. So to fix that, we need to get rid of the stupid anti-trans laws. And then they all want the anti-trans laws to stay there but they're using this picture to scare people anyway. Like Joe Rogan posted it. Like, it's just so stupid. It's unreal. And the thing is, it works because like 99% of the world's population haven't seen this picture before. They get told trans people are allowed to compete with women. They don't even know what trans men are. Here's a picture of a man fighting a woman. Doesn't matter. Now they're panicking. And it's just this is the only reason that trans people don't have rights, is because we have this tiny little voice and we're up against like the British media and the neo-Nazis and everything, spreading all this garbage with just no one to counter them. Like, this could have been a dunk. Any newspaper in the UK could have been like, did you see Breitbart accidentally posted this? They could have done an article on this, but they're not going to. Like, it's a cell phone, it's ridiculous, and they got like thousands of likes. Ridiculous. On the theme of Nazis. So 2 weekends ago, I went on Talk Heathen, which is an atheist call-in show run by the ACA, which was really exciting. And I was on there with V, who is amazing. And it was the first ever all-trans show that the ACA had ever run on anything, we think. So that's really exciting. And you should go and watch it, and it's like linked on my page. It's also on the Talk Heathen page. But this guy comes in and says, you guys were like Nazis, forcing us to call by your correct pronouns, and you were really rude towards us theists. Like, you can make up your own mind about whether we were rude to the callers. I don't actually think we were. But like, firstly, no, we weren't. I actually genuinely don't think we mentioned pronouns for the whole episode. I actually don't think it came up. I think this is just a generic trans people exist, so I'm going to complain about pronouns, because that's what you do when you're an idiot. But I do also like this little, you're like Nazis forcing people to call you by the correct pronouns. Just don't be wrong. Like, if it was like Nazis are forcing me to do the morally wrong thing, then like, okay. But no, you're saying it's like these flipping Nazis came in and made me like donate to a kitten charity. Like, okay. Ridiculous. So we're going to step up on the Nazi rhetoric for a little while in a row here. This one was just completely ridiculous. Tell me, if trans women are women, why didn't the Nazis force them into the Lebensborn program? So this person's coming in and being like, the Nazis also agreed with me, so checkmate. Like, mate, we don't even need to look up what this program is to see this is already a terrible argument, because you're literally just walking in and being like, well, how come the Nazis didn't agree with you? The reason the Nazis didn't agree with me is because the Nazis hate trans people, because they're like the extreme version of the patriarchy, and obviously hate all LGBT people and did a genocide, and that you seem to be ideologically aligned with them, which is a big cell phone. So I actually really should have read about what the Lebensborn program is. Sorry, I'm a really rubbish news person. It's worth looking up. It was something to do with breeding. I think they took, it was like trying to breed Aryan children, and so they were like stealing children with blonde hair and blue eyes off of single mothers and giving them to like strong family units, because they didn't, like, the Nazis hated single mothers because they're the patriarchy. It was a bit more complicated than that. The point this person's trying to make is, like, if trans women are women, then why can't they give birth? That's basically the argument they're making, and the answer is, well, but not all women can give birth. That's a rubbish argument. But it's also extra rubbish when you've cloaked it inside, well, the Nazis didn't agree with you. So let's step it up. So this is the point where, like, this is going to get a lot worse, by the way. I'm sorry, everyone. Just making a point how the British media and the state of the gender critical movement, which is mainly British, like, how bad this is. These are some randoms. So these are just random people. And of course, you know, there are probably random people in any movement who are going to be Nazis. I don't know. There are no Nazis pushing for trans rights, I can tell you that. But, to be completely fair and overly generous to the gender critical movement, some rank and file idiots being Nazis doesn't mean it's a Nazi movement. I mean, pointing out that they're allied with the Nazis is pretty damning enough. But anyway, we're not just going to look at rank and file idiots, but here's another rank and file idiot. I hope scientists can identify the genes that cause this shit so women can band together, I presume, and commit genocide against them. So here we have someone who's like, I hope we find a way of like finding the trans gene. And this is actually why LGBT people often, I mean, there's an argument both ways, but a lot of LGBT people don't want them to find a gay gene or a trans gene. Because if you do, then they might start aborting people, or, in the future, they might be able to sequence your genes from a distance and like tell if you're LGBT before you even know it. Like, there are some arguments why it isn't necessarily bad. Like, it might be good to know whether you are really trans, because it would take some of the struggle off trying to work yourself out. If someone just like, oh, I've checked your DNA, mate, you're a trans person. But generally it's bad, and it's bad because of people like this. And then this person, so the reason this is a dark screenshot rather than a light one, is because I stole it off someone else. But so they deleted this tweet. But this person said, hey, poo emoji, why did you make a tweet advocating for genocide? Delete it and then like a reply that also advocated for genocide. And they're like, because it was funny. And this isn't like some teenage boy. This is like a gender critical person who isn't a teenage boy. I think it was a woman, and I think they were an adult. It's what I'm saying. Anyway, just that was just an extra little. I mean, this could almost be a headline piece in any other situation, but it's going to get a lot worse. So here is pro-conversion therapy hate group transgender trend, equating some like conference or something they had. Heather Brunskill Evans, they all have double-barreled surnames, which is very, just pointing that out. She's saying that transgender children, the concept is fiction. It's a phenomenon that doesn't even exist. So just a reminder from earlier, we had the Biden erased women hashtag, and we had trans activists hounding women out of public spaces, or public life. And then we have one of the biggest gender critical groups. Like, this is one of the major ones. Like, one of the big five or whatever. Just straight up saying that trans children don't exist. So, like, where do you think they come? Do you think on your 18th birthday you're like, pow, now I'm a trans person? This doesn't make sense even on the surface level analysis. It's just trivially bullshit. Of course trans kids exist. What they're trying to do here is they're trying to separate, it's like what the homophobes do, where they say, oh, you're not a gay person, you're a person who experiences homosexual urges, and you need to deal with that. Because being a gay person is a political position that you have chosen. And I'm not saying you've chosen you to have your urges, you've chosen to not combat your urges. It's like, oh, which is why they always make this paedophile reference, like, maybe there are some people out there who attract to children who don't act on it, and we don't even know, and you should just be like them. Like, it's completely disgusting bullshit, like, homophobia as old as time. And, of course, all transphobia is recycled homophobia, so that's exactly what this is. This is them saying, oh yeah, sure, some people are born with gender dysphoria, but they're not trans until they politically identify as one. So they do literally think that you can become a trans person on your 18th birthday, because that's the point in which you can make political decisions. So, like, complete bullshit, like, literally erasing trans kids. I mean, not like, but it gets worse. There's about 3 more where this gets worse, by the way. It's very, like, I kind of be desensitized to this, so it's almost funny how ridiculous this is. But just to be clear, this is really serious. And And I'm laughing to deal with it because this is happening in the UK right now. Like, these guys are raising tens of thousands of pounds all the time to combat against trans healthcare. They were involved in the UK ban on under 16s having trans healthcare. They gave evidence to the judge. The judge didn't see any pro-trans organisations. Like, it's horrific what's going on. And it's about to get a lot worse. Here is this episode's really grim. All the other episodes are funnier, I promise. Here is the Women's Human Rights Campaign, WHRC, UK. And they are replying to the UK, so this is an official UK government submission to the Call for Evidence for the Gender Recognition Act, blah, blah, blah. It's not important to know what that is, but they've submitted to the government, and the government has chosen to publish this. And just important that what this organisation is, WHRC. And they have a website called womensdeclaration.com, which perhaps you can go and visit, which has, as they say, 12,000 signatures, and including 281 organisations. And the organisations that have signed this are like Transgender Trend, LGB Alliance. I did actually write a little notepad down. It loads of major Object UK. Actually, let me see if I can find it. LGB Alliance, Transgender Trend, Labour Women's Declaration, Object UK, Safe Schools Alliance, Standing for Women, Wolf, are amongst the organisations that have signed this like declaration, where they're this group. They're part of this like group and this movement, and this is kind of like trying to have an official government-facing gender-critical position. And also, like, I haven't had time to go through these signatures, but I know that Kathleen Stock is on there, who we mentioned earlier, and I suspect that probably all of the gender-critical people who are anyone are on this list. And it might be worth looking to see who's on there, which I'm not going to do. Anyway, so this is their government submission that they openly provided to people looking for evidence about the Gender Recognition Act. So they've said the UN Women Convention on Gender Equality calls for the elimination of prejudices and customary and all other practices which are based on the idea of the inferiority or superiority of either of the sexes or on stereotyped roles for men or women. Article 5. Okay, I'm on board with that. We, WHRC, and all these people who have signed their bullshit, consider that the practice of transgenderism clearly falls under this article because it is based on stereotype roles for men and women, which it isn't. It's bullshit. So, like, quite explicitly here, they are calling being trans a thing, and they are, like, calling for the elimination of it. Like, I don't think, there's no other way to read this. This isn't me, like, picking words out of nowhere. I mean, like, pause the video and just check and read. Like, I just read out what it says here. These people are literally calling for the elimination of trans people. This goes back to, like, the TERF Bible, I guess. It's a bit different to gender critical, but like the TERF Bible written by Janice Raymond in the 70s, Transsexual Empire, in which he says that, like, she doesn't want to say trans people should be exterminated because, I mean, you don't want to look that much of a Nazi even when you are one. She said that trans people should be morally mandated out of existence. And what that means is, we should make healthcare inaccessible. We should make sure they don't have rights. We should make it so they can't get housing. We should make it so blah, blah, blah. And it just makes it impossible to exist as a trans person. And that's like the goal of the gender critical movement. And here they are just like openly saying it in a submission to the UK government. Like, it's just like asking for evidence and getting submission from the Ku Klux Klan or something. Like, it's horrific that they're just calling for this. It's just so extreme. And this is the state that the gender critical movement has got into, where they're just calling for the elimination of transgenderism. It's horrifying. I want more people to see this because they've submitted this to this government in some thousands of words thing. There's thousands of submissions. It's so easy to miss this. And it's really serious. Like, this is a really big deal. It's so grim. Yeah. So it's worth looking at the list of people who have signed on to this nonsense. To be clear as well, these people like explicitly say they want to ban, like in their declaration thing on the website, you can go and read it. They say they want to ban trans women and girls from women's spaces. They want to stop us from having legal protections from sexual assault and like all kinds of things, like full on extremists. Like these people are extremists, and that's not an exaggeration to say that. And they are a mainstream position in the UK for trans people. And that's why the media is so bad. Anyway, let's take it up a notch. So this is a little tech attempt. So hopefully this video, when I click play, is about to click play. And we're just going to listen to, this is Posey Parker, who is the leader of Standing for Women, which is another group. I'm not sure if they're affiliated with the last one or not. You can look it up. But she is the originator of the, as you can see at the back there, in her like Moulin Rouge lights, adult human female slogan, which has become like one of the sort of calling cards of the gender critical movement. I think that like she's a very important figure in the gender critical movement and like speaks for a lot of people in it, or a lot of people in it respect her position. But it would be dishonest to say that she's like universally like praised in the way that J.K. Rowling is. She's a lot more controversial, and there is a large section of the gender critical movement who don't like her and haven't for years, because she's she's done a few things, and there's not really any point in me bigging her up because we're about to see exactly what she's like. So
had a bit of an idea about some of the things that you can do, and men, for once, I'm talking to you. I'm talking about you, dads, who maybe carry, I think that's what you say, I'm so down with the American lingo, maybe you carry, maybe you don't, maybe you consider yourself a protector of women, maybe you're that sort of man, maybe you have a daughter, or a mother, or a wife, maybe you have a sister, maybe you just have some friends, maybe you just think women are human, and you don't need any absolute connection with them to feel compelled to protect us. I think you should start using women's toilets, men.
So, there she is suggesting that men who carry guns, in case you didn't get that euphemism, should start using the women's toilets in the context of trans people using the toilets. Just like straight out saying, I would rather that men with guns use the women's toilets than trans women. She's actually deleted this video now because it started getting mass reported, understandably. So you can't go and watch the full context, but like, this is horrific. And this is such a sign of the state of gender critical, at least a huge section of it. Like, this isn't a tiny little side fringe piece. This is like one of the main people involved in it. Not as, like I was saying, not like representative of the whole movement, but representative of like, I've got a cat hair on my nose, oh no. Representative of a large portion of it. And like, you encounter these people all the time. You know, anyone who has adult human female in their bio, or they're sticking stickers all around the town centre, or like, you know, this is such a big section of it. Like, I might even say it's the majority of gender critical people who I encounter, at least. And they've got this position where, like, I guess they've just completely given up on this we're defending women thing. Or at least not to themselves. They still think they're doing that, but they've given up on pretending that to the wider public, because they're just saying, like, you know, part of their arguments is, like, a classic gender critical argument is, oh, it's not that I'm scared of trans people, I'm just worried of men abusing the laws, which never happens. Well, it's happened like once in the whole history of the world or whatever. But, you know, that's a classic argument. But you can't make that argument if you're then advocating for men with guns to come into the women's toilets. That's like, it's horrifying. Like, what are you talking about? You're honestly more afraid of 0.3% of the women in the toilets with you being trans, which has been the case for your entire life, then you are just throwing away the rules completely and not having just random cis men in there with you, but having cis men with guns in there to scare off the trans women. I mean, all this is going to do, as we've seen in literally everywhere that's tried to have a bathroom bill, is that random men, random angry drunk men, will see a woman with short hair or women wearing trousers or something, or a woman with like a square face, and they will decide she's a man and they'll harass her and they'll have guns. And like, I know so many cis women who have been targeted or abused for like, oh, you're in the wrong toilets, mate, or like, or worse, because they're like gender non-conforming. Oh, you know, it's quite often butch lesbians who get this target. You know, gender critical people always claim to be defending lesbians, which is nonsense. But I've never had that. I know women who are like, you know, 50 years old or something, and they've had it their entire life since they were teenagers. They've been confronted in the toilets like almost on a regular basis, and I don't have it. And it's not like, it's just, if we let random men into the toilets with guns, then most of the people who they assault will be cis women, and that's just a fact. It's just horrifying. I don't think I can exaggerate this beyond how bad it is. Anyway, just another one that just happened this week that I just happened to see. So this is the same lady who got suspended from Facebook for 30 days. She's banned from Twitter. No one cares that you're gay, mate. It's a bit wrong. It's the wrong decade, and it's now a bit dull. It's creating children in rented wombs. Mothers carry infants, bond with their babies in a way that you could never dream of. So, just to be clear, there's a radical feminist position which is opposed to surrogacy. And I think that there's arguments for and against surrogacy. At least commercial surrogacy, I think, can be very bad, because you can get in a situation where poor people are kind of pressured into like renting out their wombs just to pay their rent and things, and like that, you know, when capitalism meets these kinds of things, it can very quickly be very bad for the most vulnerable women in society. So if you wanted to say, I think surrogacy is bad, like, at least you could have an argument there, even if you personally disagree or agree with it. But weirdly, gender critical people only seem to care when gay men have a surrogate child, and not when straight couples do it. And this, so she goes on to say here, in ways you can never dream of, our bodies are so connected to our babies that our breasts work before the baby even cries, even if the child is in another room. No man can ever replace a mother. We are mammals after all. Like, mammals comment just completely, like, what does that even mean? There are plenty of mammals which the father has literally no interaction with the child at all. For example, blue whales. When blue whales are born, the male has long gone, and that's it. And the child spends the whole time with the mum. Wait. So I went on a bit of a rant there about the wrong thing. How embarrassing. No, but like, anyway, what I'm saying is, this is just a random comment about mammals. Anyway, but so the rant I was going on there is about ones that don't have fathers, but obviously whales have mothers. But the important point here is that like, gay men can raise children. Like, that's perfectly fine. In fact, penguins, which aren't mammals, sometimes have gay couples which raise chicks. Like, we don't need to be doing this argument. There are plenty of examples of gay people having perfectly fine families. You can have a single dad. It doesn't even have to be a gay person. And like, children can grow up with single dads. They can grow up with two dads. They can grow up as a penguin chick with two male penguins. Like, it's such a crap argument. It's just homophobic. And it's just one of these examples of gender critical people learning some vaguely feminist concept and just weaponizing it, and not having any actual, it's not a real position here. This isn't someone saying, I think surrogacy is bad because commercial surrogacy can lead to the pressuring of women to rent out their bodies. What she's saying is like, oh, gay people fuck off. Like, that's it, isn't it? It's nonsense. It's completely nonsense. There are animals, I guess, where the mother isn't so involved in like specifically raising her own children. There are like some with social groups. This is the argument I should have been making about animals. I just thought of it. For example, there's actually some humans where their culture, they don't really know whose children are whose, and they just raise all the children all together. There was a tribe in Brazil that had that I watched a documentary on, and I have no more facts for you on that at all, but it's true. And like, I guess maybe meerkats, I don't know. I'm digging a bit here now. Anyway, we'll move on. So this is a funny thing. So I'm not sure if it actually said in her little video at the bottom that, no, okay, it didn't. So she's decided that she's not a feminist because, you know, feminists support gay rights and stuff. So she's created a new word for her, which is femalist, which so fits in with gender critical, where they're like, you know, adult human female, like it's all about being female. And that's the argument. The reason they said that is just an attempt to make sure trans women don't count. But hilariously, femalist already has a definition. Femalist, someone who courts or pursues the female sex. A womanizer. Which is just like, it's just so ironically perfect here that someone who has got famous from printing a dictionary definition, adult human female, on a t-shirt, has now tried to make a new one and has picked one which the dictionary is really bad. Like, someone needs to print this on a t-shirt and send it to her. Massive cell phone. Nearly as much as a cell phone is going on a rant about Wales, eh? I just like Wales, okay? Not the country. I do like the country, really. Anyway, onwards. Women don't want to share their spaces with male-bodied individuals. Can you respect that? Trans can have their housing and not getting treated like shit whilst not participating in women's-only activities. How can you not be able to understand that? Like, it's kind of just a generic rant here against trans people. I actually don't respect the idea of banning trans women from women's spaces that they've used their whole lives, actually. Anyway, this next person's like, nah, but like, so this first person is a Trump supporter. It's quite clear from their profile. And they're also a gender critical person. So this next person's like, nah, but you're happy with a former male-bodied president who likes to grab women by the pussy. So this isn't really a good argument. This is just saying, like, mate, you don't really care about women because you supported a misogynist. Like, there's a good argument to say that Joe Biden's at least a misogynist in his past. But, like, you know, it's just a classic internet argument. And then they've stepped it up a bit more childish, and they've said at least he grabbed actual pussies and not caves made from 10 to 7 hours of surgery. Like, just imagine if your comeback was, you supported a misogynist, and they're like, well, at least he only raped cis women. That's horrific. What are you on about? Oh, grim. Like, also, it doesn't take 7 to 10 hours for GRS. Some of the techniques take like 2 to 3 hours. It's just an extra, you know, when you're gender critical, you just have to be wrong all the time. You can't ever just be wrong just once. You know, you've got to sneak in a little extra wrong, a little extra piece of ignorance at the end. Crap argument. Anyway, onwards. So now we are entering in, so we've dealt with all the horrific stuff, and I just want to end it on some more funny things. So just to say that the gender critical movement in the UK is extreme. The mainstream position is very extreme. I would call a lot of the mainstream people who write for newspapers and get TV slots and stuff are extremists. Like, if you're, you know, some of the stuff that we've seen earlier is very extreme. When you're signing some declaration which says they want to eliminate trans people, like that's an extremist position. Anyway, now we're going to move on to some idiots. So let's do some laughing. Yay! I'm actually drinking this wine from New Zealand, and it's invisible. It's got a kakapo on it, and they're a really fun bird. Anyway, if you test positive for testosterone, you are male. What part of that What part about that people don't... Ugh. It's so stupid, it's hard to read. What part about that don't people want to understand? Testing positive for testosterone. So this is good for all the trans men in the audience. If you've ever had a blood test and had testosterone back, you're a male. Congratulations. This is bad news for all of the trans women and cis women in the audience, because you're all male too. In fact, everyone is male apart from some trans people, which will some trans women, which would have had testosterone tests and the results would have come back too low to measure, because lots of trans women are on testosterone blockers that are so strong that their testosterone is like too small to measure. So possibly, according to this person, most cis women and most trans women are male, most trans men are male, most cis men are male, but a small handful of trans women are women. You're either a woman or a man. Women have reproductive organs and men don't. It's as simple as that. So we all know that women have a uterus and ovaries and a vagina and a penis and testicles, and men are like Barbie. Where do you come up with this stuff? Just imagine writing that down and like not reading it back. Like, what's wrong with you? It's ridiculous. So this guy's one of these guys who thinks they're a really big deal and isn't. You know that kind of guy. He did this really like proper embarrassing rap about how trans women like Batman. Like, I would recommend, like, if you want to have like a how far can you last without cringing competition, it's worth searching like rap about Batman and trans women. It's really bad. Anyway, he says, human beings are the only species of mammal that actively seek and undergo the destruction of their reproductive organs under a delusion that they were supposed to be the opposite sex. We're told this stems from a natural impulse and is not the result of a psychiatric comorbidity. So, first of all, mate, humans are the only animals that like do surgery or like modern medicine or science, and that it's not really an argument against it being bad. That's like the classical like failure arguments in like only humans are gay. Like, well, that's not actually true, but also even if they were the only animals that are gay, like we're the only animals that drive cars, and that doesn't mean driving cars is like unnatural or bad. It's just not an argument. It's a complete non-argument. Right, so maybe trans people only exist in humans. Okay. Well done, 411 likes. Complete nonsense. Like, it's one of those things that sounds clever and then isn't. But then talking of sounding clever and then isn't, of a psychiatric comorbidity with what? Do you know what comorbidity means? Like, with what? Oh, it's just so dumb. It's just like, here's a very smart sounding argument and some smart sounding words linked together. Checkmate, trans people. I mean, it's not impressive. It doesn't mean anything. It's not an argument. You don't need to debunk this kind of thing, because it's like, well, I mean, other than the fact that you've chosen some words that don't make sense and some other words that are clearly like destruction of reproductive organs, like, you know, that also describes vasectomies and mastectomies. Humans, like women, might go and get a hysterectomy to reduce their chance of cancer, and that's seeking to undergo the destruction of their reproductive organs. But like, so what? Like, you can frame it like that if you like, if you're a misogynist dickhead, but like, that doesn't mean it's bad. That doesn't mean anything. You've just chosen words to make it sound horrible because you're a twat. An embarrassing twat. So the stupid never stops. as there are no trans women, fact, none, I'm a cis woman, as there are no trans women, but only men and women, the world record, blah, 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 sports, for this imaginary group is, of course, the men's one. Well, I tell you what, mate, if there's no such thing as trans women, then what have you spent all your time arguing about? Ridiculous. Like, oh, Biden erased women. Biden erased, you're erasing women. You're erasing the language of women. We can't even talk about women anymore. By the way, trans people don't exist. Fuck off. Embarrassing. Oh, talking of embarrassing and also sports, this is one of my like routine hate followers, who comes out with absolute garbage. I'm not going to read out all of this junk. You're welcome to pause the video and read it out if you want to give yourself a headache. But this guy in incredibly broken English. So I said, here's a full list of all the trans Olympians in the 17 years since 2004 when they could first compete. And then there are obviously none. Trans women and trans men both underperform at sports across the board at top levels. That's not an opinion, that's a fact. And that is just literally a fact. There's been no trans Olympians. Like, there's been a few trans people who've got world records in a few sports, in a few categories, but far, far away, orders of magnitude away from 0.3% of all achievements in sports being trans people, which is what you would expect if it was fair. So, just to explain that, if you had a machine in the hospital that randomly tattooed a little red dot onto the foot of 1 in 10 babies, just totally at random, and it did it to every single baby in the country for 50 years, you would expect that because 1 in 10 at random of these babies have this tattoo of the dot on their foot, that 1 in 10 of the people winning the Olympics would have that tattoo, or winning the world championships, or the country championships. You know, if you did every baby in the world, it'd be the Olympics. You know what I mean? Because having a tiny dot tattooed on your foot doesn't affect your performance. You know, if you picked like which day of the week people were born on, you would expect roughly 1 in 7, you know, of the days of the week. So like 1 in 7 of the people who win the Olympics should be born on a Wednesday. Like, you would expect that because being born on a Wednesday doesn't affect your performance. So that means if there is a thing that you can have, like being left-handed, having long hair, being really tall, liking bread, like any of these things, if you were to do a survey of all of the people winning sports, and if the rate at which they have that thing is greater than is in the general population, then you might say, potentially, not guaranteed, potentially this means that people with this thing are better at sports. So, for example, you might find that, and this is a fact, left-handed people perform better in certain sports. So I think like in fencing or something, more than 1 in 10 people who win the championships are left-handed. And that's because of most people are right-handed, so most people practice against right-handed people. So when you you don't practice against left-handed people as much, and so you can't watch their moves, whereas most left-handed people practice against right-handed people, so they have an upper hand. So in that case, you could say being left-handed gives you an advantage, or at least we can say that it might give you an advantage. There might be some other cause for both of those things. And I mean, this is really basic statistics. I don't really need to explain this, but we can say for a fact that trans people underperform at sports. And maybe that's because of transphobia. Maybe it's because of biology. Maybe it's because of money. Maybe it's like there's a whole host of reasons it could be. But what they don't do is overperform at sports. And that's just statistically true. But this guy tries to make the argument, like he tries to do a little maths dance, and it's absolutely embarrassing. He's like, so my argument is if trans people, if they were overperforming, in sports, then over 0.3% or whatever percentage trans people occur in the general population, over 0.3% of all sporting victories would be by trans people. That would be a good that would be good evidence that they were overperforming a sport, because that's like literally what overperforming sport is. That's not the case. But then he's like, can you even do maths? What percentage of women even get into the Olympics? Like 40% really? No, like just like he's just trying to be like, it's so rare to get into the Olympics, so your maths doesn't count. Like, it's just complete absolute failure of understanding. Just embarrassing. Like, imagine how do people get like this? Like, I remember when I was at school one time, we had something where we had to write about a kayak, I don't know. But this kayak said it was made of wood. And one of my friends claimed that wooden kayaks must be lighter than fiberglass ones. And the teacher was like, what are you talking about? Of course fiberglass ones are lighter. Like, have you even weighed these two things? And my friend was like, have you ever dragged a fiberglass kayak up a beach? And the teacher was like, no. And he's like, well, it's flipping heavy. It's like, okay. So the wooden one can't be heavier. So you're like, just because, like, if you've only experienced one thing, that doesn't mean the other thing has to be light. My brain is melting. I'm not even having the words to explain how ridiculous this is. But this is kind of the argument this person's making here. Like, I say, well, if it was fair, then 3 out of every 1,000 people in the Olympics would be trans. And this person's like, what? Like, it's so rare to get into the Olympics, it probably means that no trans people get in anyway. Just from the odds. Like, that's not how odds work, mate. You're an idiot. Anyway, I've done enough on that one. We're coming to the end. Don't worry, everyone. Thank you for keeping your energy up this whole time. I've seen the comment section going all funny. It's good. Anyway, last couple. So, I said, someone accused me of twisting the narrative. And I was like, twisting the narrative? Transphobia has got so bad in the UK that many/most trans people are genuinely afraid of running into gender critical people in public. How is that even controversial? Like, that's just a truth. That's just a fact. Lots of cis women probably are too. Only takes one bad accusation to ruin your day or worse. I mean, that's what we've been talking about the whole time. If you put men with guns in the toilets, then all women lose out. That's just what I'm saying here. Then this person comes in and says, I would be terrified to bump into UKT on a night out. And like, I decided not to react to this. Like, it's kind of a bit offensive. Not because, I mean, it's offensive because you're being transphobic. But like, I'm quite fun on a night out. Seriously, mate. You wouldn't be terrified. Like, I mean, if you would, it'd be completely bogus because, like, I would probably be drunk and I'd probably buy you a drink. And we'd probably go onto the gay bar and have a good time. Anyway, nonsense. But then someone comes in and says, baselessly, Katie has done nothing to warrant this fear-mongering. And then they said, baseless, yet it's how I feel, so we have that. My feelings don't care about your facts. I mean, yeah, mate, if you're irrationally scared of me, then it is sad. It's sad that there are people out there who are genuinely afraid of trans people. Like, it feels horrible to be treated like a monster. To have someone decide that they're scared of you because of their idea of what you are. Like, I'm just a normal person. I'm just a normal woman. And if you met me out on a night out and I was drunk, then we would get on. Like, I get on with everyone. It's just ridiculous. But to just admit that, yeah, of course, my accusation is completely baseless, but I've decided it's true. And I just think that just represents transphobia perfectly. Right. This person says, there shouldn't even be male cleaners in ladies' toilets, nor ladies' cleaners in gentlemen's toilets. This is hedonistic. Undignified. World is out of control. You don't understand this as you've never known anything but hedonism. Yeah. Like in my world, in my hedonistic worldview where I just want to enjoy and have pleasure all the time, I just live for the moment and I just get drunk all the time. That's where I want female cleaners in the male toilets. Ugh, makes no sense. I've just picked a random word that I've heard of. I'm just going to call it that. Absolute nonsense. There's a few more than I was expecting. I ranted longer than I should have today. I apologise, everyone. So I was like, there are possibly more cis women sex offenders in the UK than there are trans women in total. So there was an estimate a while ago from The Guardian that there are 64,000 women child sex offenders in the UK, which is a lot. And if you take the low estimate of trans people, like 0.1%, then that's like 60,000. So it's in that range anyway, within that order of magnitude potentially. Like your chance of being sexually assaulted by a cis woman is much higher than your chance of being assaulted by a trans woman, because cis women outnumber trans women like 1,000 to 1, of course. But then this person says, women don't rape other women. And this is a little bullshit UK thing where in the UK, technically, women can't rape other women because rape can only be done with a penis. Well, this is what they love about it. Trans women can technically rape other women, but cis women can't. And that's not quite true, because you can actually be arrested for rape if you participated in it, but you weren't the one doing it. So there are women in prison. There are cis women in prison right now for rape who don't have penises. Anyway, this is like in the UK, it used to not count as rape to if you raped your wife. And like if you then said, oh, you can't rape your wife in the UK, like that would obviously be bullshit, because you can, because it's rape. Forced sex on someone is rape. And in the UK, technically the legal definition doesn't cover that. In lots of countries it does. And morally, when you say rape, you know what people mean. They mean forced sex, and that's exactly what we're talking about. So I was just like, that's plainly false. Of course they can. That's nonsense. And then they come back with, have you ever heard of a biological woman raping someone? I mean, I actually know a few people who were raped by women, which is really grim. And so often I see gender critical people tell them they're lying, and it's horrible. Just please stop doing it. It's horrific. I myself have been sexually assaulted by a woman. The first person I was ever sexually assaulted by was a woman, and it was horrible. Anyway, they're saying it usually happens, so that they're saying it never happens, and then they're saying if it does happen, then it's because they're coerced by a man. And then they come out with, women just aren't violent. Stop denying reality. And this is a very like tedious gender critical meme, because on the surface, I think for a lot of people this can almost sound like good. Like when you say women aren't violent, like, men are violent. Like, well, kind of, women are generally, in our society at least, less violent than men. And I think probably across the world, it would be fair to say in every single culture. Whether you blame that on biology or society or a mix of both, it's just generally true anyway. But to say women can't be violent or aren't violent is actually horrible, because there are so many people who are victims of, abusive mothers or partners, who've been attacked and assaulted and raped by women. And that's not at all to say that it's like equal with the number who have been attacked by men. Men commit most of the crimes. That's just a fact. Men commit most of the sexual crimes. That's just a fact. Men do most of the rapes, do most of the assaults. Men are more likely to be the victims as well. But, I mean, that's important to point out. And as a feminist, to do these feminist analyses and stuff, it's important to just acknowledge the facts. And it is not a fact to say women aren't violent. That's just ridiculous. And it's this kind of gender critical binary. They love everything to be a binary. Men are violent, women aren't. Part of the binary. And it's a way of justifying excluding trans women from things by saying trans women are violent, cis women aren't. Like, that's just a little dichotomy they have which is, it's rubbish. And it's not just rubbish because of trans people. Like, I'm not just annoyed at this because it's something to do with trans people. I mean, this doesn't have to be. If I hadn't included my original tweet, it, you know, this is just bullshit on its own. It's bullshit to say women can't be violent to people because there are so many people out there who have experienced violence from women, and to just like tell rape victims and assault victims that, sorry, you made it up. It's just horrific. It's just grim. And it like, I see this a lot from Gender Critical. This isn't one off. This is like a meme within the movement. So someone then replied, this is an outright lie. Women don't get harassed for not looking feminine enough. That's just stonewall bullshit. I mean, that happens all the time. It's ridiculous. We've already talked about it. So then someone replied saying, stop erasing inconvenient women, with an article of a woman who was like attacked in a bathroom for not looking feminine enough. Rubbish. And then, so our friend from the last tweet has said, if men would know that their place isn't in women's spaces, gender non-conforming girls would be left alone. So what they're saying here, like, I mean, decoding their little gender critical bullshit language, they're saying, okay, I accept that cis women, or any women, are attacked for looking wrong, actually. I'll back down. But it's trans people's fault. It's not trans people's fault, mate. It's your fault. It's gender critical people's fault. It's transphobic people's fault. Like, no trans person is looking at that lady and thinking, I need to confront her in the bathroom. Like, if she's looking under people's stools, or if she's like, you know, perving on people or something, confront her. Get the manager, get the security, whatever. If she's just minding her own business, she knows better who she is than you do. Like, fuck off. And the only people wanting to confront random people because they don't look right is gender critical people. So it's entirely your fault. If your movement, if trans people didn't exist, you would still be doing this. And if gender critical people didn't exist, then this wouldn't happen. So fuck off. Like, this is a direct consequence of gender critical, and it's getting worse, and everyone knows it's getting worse, and they're all having to deny it. Yeah, it's disgusting. I actually would like to do a series of video interviews, just like quick ones, and put it together as like a video with cis women who have been confronted for being men or looking wrong or not being feminine enough in women's spaces. So hit me up if that's you. And you would be willing to go on video and talk about it. Because I think it's kind of overlooked, and it is the main consequence of bathroom bills. Like, for sure, it ruins trans people's lives. You put a bathroom bill in, it's going to ruin my life, and it's going to be a huge deal to me. But in terms of numbers, more cis women than trans women are going to be affected by it because there's so many more of them. Rubbish. Anyway, we're on to the last one. Nearly done, guys. So we'll just finish on a completely ridiculous note to end my rant. So I got this random DM from someone who made their account this year, and they said, hello there, Katie. If you have a son, he's having sex right now. Just letting you know. Then they sent me a photo, which I didn't open. Then they liked their own photo. Then they said, that's, sad face, my dog. My DMs are a magical place. It's an experience being in my DMs, that's for sure. So anyway, thank you for hanging around, guys, and watching my TERF Wars episode 5 of season 2. We've run over a bit. Like, as I've said every episode so far, but seriously, like, this week I was like, crap, I actually don't think I have enough for a whole hour. I was worried that because I usually try and aim for like 30 slides. And it turns out I've run over by half an hour because I actually had like 60 slides and I had to cut it down as much as I could. I'm going to try and keep it to an hour in future, but there is just so much stuff every week, so much gender critical bullshit. There's always the idiots who are telling you that you're not a woman if you have testosterone. There's the idiots telling you that, you know, you can't be attacked by a woman. And then there's the people calling for the elimination of trans people. There's the people saying maybe men with guns should come in and threaten women who don't look right. Like, this is normal. This is weekly. This happens every single week in the UK and it's getting worse. And like, I don't want to like fearmonger and make trans people feel bad. I just want everyone to be aware of it. And I just think that you should tell people about this. Like, I tell my cis friends about this, and they're so horrified because they don't realize how bad it is, because, you know, they're in a place where they don't have to experience it, which is good, because no one should experience it. But, you know, people need to know about how deranged it's getting, and it's getting worse, and it's, you know, they're flailing a bit at the moment because of the Biden thing and him being kind of good for trans people, and that might exert international pressure, and like Twitter's started banning them all, and like it's kind of looking good for us. There's been a few good wins in a row, and so they're going to, like, when the gender critical grip on power does finally start to crumble, and I don't think in the UK we're there yet. I think, honestly, I think it might get worse for the rest of this year, but when it does, they're gonna flail hard, and things are gonna get grim. So look out for your trans friends and trans people. I'm there for you. There are so many people there for you. Like, all the time people are messaging me and saying, I've got a trans friend and I love and support them, and I just want to know what the best thing to do is. Like, people out there love you. It's going to be fine. We're going to win this. We've had so many wins in a row. Just don't let this bullshit go unaddressed. That's my message. Anyway, thank you everyone for coming to the TERF Wars. I love all of you. Like and subscribe. And I will see you next week at 9 p.m. on Friday, as that's my new standard time. So excellent. Thank you. And we didn't have any technical difficulties. Yay!